Today is a bit of an adventure day. I've never been in this place before and I love to explore. But I'm not just out wandering around aimlessly. I actually have a destination in mind. It's always a powerful and a humbling reminder when you see a stream like this in the mountains of Pennsylvania that this water will eventually end up in the Gulf of Mexico. We live in a really big world. Many of these little tributaries, just little threads of a stream that feed into the main stream, are essential for this mountain stream to have cold water year-round, even in the largest droughts that take place in the heat of the summer. That's because these are almost always spring-fed. That means the water gurgles up from below beneath the surface. And it's good cold water and it's steady. Some of them are only a trickle, barely even visible. They may even travel underground for large portions of their length, but they're essential to the health of this stream. we've made it. This is the top of the stream. It's the source of everything that flows down below. Actually, there are probably a number of springs all over the place here, but they all most likely come from the same aquifer. Therefore, this stream's source starts right here. It's really quite remarkable sitting here and taking this all in. It may seem like a simple thing to many people, but to actually come to the source of something, to start at the bottom of the stream and to see how big it was, and now just to see a little trickle come out of the ground. This concept of a source, the source, is frequently used in the Bible in a number of ways. And one of the most common ways that it's used is in describing God as the spring of living water. God even confers this status as a spring with water that's healing and pure and clear upon us as His children. This week I've been doing a lot of thinking. I've heard all kinds of talking heads. You know, there's the task force that's meeting, constantly making decisions. There's the news media. There's talk radio. There's print. There are websites. There are conspiracy theories all over the place. Whatever you want to hear, from one extreme to the other, you can find it. And frankly, it can become quite a bit overwhelming. And that led me to the book of Isaiah. Isaiah was a prophet in the 8th century before Christ, the 700s. And he warned Israel that if they did not change their ways, that they would be met with great punishment. Unfortunately, Israel didn't listen to God nor Isaiah. And because of that, they were carted off to a foreign land, first in 701 BC by the Assyrians and later in 586 by the Babylonians. This was unthinkable because the nation of Israel was God's people. That meant that they were the ones who had this intimate relationship with God, and it was typified by the great act that God did on their behalf by setting them free from slavery in Egypt. And now they were back in slavery again. The first part of Isaiah chapter 58 is a chastisement of the nation of Israel. How they've half-heartedly jumped through the hoops to try to make God happy. They followed the letter of the law, though their hearts have been far from pure. And in many ways, they've not even done that. They violated the law by sinning against God and one another. Isaiah doesn't mince his words either. He acknowledges in verse 11 that the Israelites are in a bad position. They live in a dry and scorched land. But then he says this, it's a message of hope, because ultimately, even after judgment, even after punishment, even after paying for the consequences of sin, God is always about grace. Isaiah writes this in verse 11. He says, "You will be like a well-watered garden, and you will be like a spring that never has its waters run dry." That source can only come from God. It's not based on circumstances. It's not based on what you're experiencing at the moment. It's anchored in God Himself and the relationship that you have with Him. That was true for the Israelites back then, and it's still true for us today. Earlier I mentioned the task force and politicians and the news media and all kinds of talking heads that have ideas about what's going on in our country right now. And it's not that all of those things are bad. We need to have a plan. We need to know how to go forward. We're in a dire situation. Our economy needs to run again for us to be healthy as a nation. We need to figure out what's going on with the virus. That's important. We need to treat those who are ill. There is no shortage of a list of things to do. But I was reminded this week through Isaiah. God's voice, so long ago, still speaking today, that the most important thing is to go back to the source, to go back to God Himself, to allow that spring to gurgle up inside of us, to be renewed and refreshed by His promises and His love and His hope and His peace, to care for one another, to love each other, to reach out and extend ourselves, maybe even beyond what we might desire to do on our own. Because God, I believe, is up to something big, if only we'll allow Him to use us in this time of great need. At this crossroads in time, the big question is, what are we to do? And I think the message of the Scriptures is that we're supposed to lean into God, to follow in the footsteps of Jesus Christ, to be guided by the Holy Spirit, to listen to God and not all the talking heads around us. To go to the source first and then figure out things from there. And no matter what happens, today or any given day, in the midst of a pandemic, or just an ordinary day, we have the reassurance that we're right with God because of Jesus Christ. Go to the source, my friends, to God Himself. And though there may be difficult days ahead, you will not be disappointed in the ways of God. I'm so grateful to those in the medical field who have sacrificed during this time, to the politicians who have truly tried to make decisions that are for the benefit of the people, to protect them, to watch out for them, and to try to get our country running again. To individual, ordinary people who have done things to care for neighbors, giving them help as they've lost jobs, or just listening to them as they go through depressing times. But I'm reminded that though it's not flashy, it's our connection to God that really sustains us. He uses all these other things, the medical field, people, politicians, different infrastructures around the world, but it's really God who sustains us all. Snowflakes are falling on my head. This is the month of May. I thought it would be sun Instead of all the wind and snow, what can we do? Oh, what can we do? Special shout out to my wife Heidi. Happy Mother's Day. You are one hard-working mother. And oh, by the way, this stream is actually named after you. We'll talk about it.